small fraction of 300 million. And they're not going to come over and just suck off the American teat of welfare and benefits. Many of them want a better life. Many of them want to work really hard. Not all of them. I'll put the inverse on Trump. They've come here to live a good life. They want to provide for themselves and their family and their kids. That's what they want to do. And if you let them do that and you let them get a job, they make money, they pay taxes. That grows an economy, by the way, not hurting it. But let's go on with Donald.
People, there's so many things that I just don't like what I'm seeing. I don't like what I'm seeing at all. And look.
Okay, so he repeats he doesn't like what he's seeing, but he can't name anything except for immigrants, because this is a one-trick pony. It's immigrants, immigrants, immigrants. It's the outsiders. It's the others. It's this fascist, xenophobic idea that we are the true Americans because we were all born here and our ancestors were born here for 1,000 years. Oh, no, wait, we weren't. That's the Native American Indians who got wiped out by our guns and steel and germs. Anyway, back to Donald.
Interest rates are artificially low. If interest rates ever seek a natural level, which obviously would be much higher than they are right now, you have some very scary scenarios out there. I mean, the only reason the stock market's where it is because you get free money.
Oh, he's crazy. It's not free money. Interest rates are low, and interest rates are low to stimulate the economy. And that part is true. And interest rates don't have, per se, a natural level. And B, they don't seek a natural level, at least in one regard, because the Fed increases the overnight lending rate, which is assigned to everybody else what the rate should be. But when U.S. long-term rates go down for U.S. long-term bonds, which they did dramatically in the end of June, it's because people buy those bonds and they push up the price. So demand is higher than supply. And when that happens, the prices go up and the yields go down. That's just how it works. And people get what they're willing to pay for. And they came in and bond prices went up and the yields went down because people were concerned and scared about Brexit. And when people are scared about investing, like apparently Donald Trump is, even though it's going to be great, they pull out of stocks and they put their money in bonds. And this is what happens. Bonds seek the level based on supply and demand. Now, the Fed overnight rate between banks, they control that, and it has some influence. But other countries in the world, we're becoming a global economy, whether he wants it to happen or not. There are some German government bonds now that pay a negative interest rate. So if you invest $100,000, next year you could have $99,500 negative interest rate. That is truly amazing. It's not unique and unprecedented, but it's rare. It's very, very rare. And that tells you that that investor is so happy to get 99.5% of their money back that they're going to do that because the German economy is strong and you're going to get your money back just like the United States government. You're going to get 100% of your money back plus interest, unless, of course, Trump wants to default on them. Let's go back to what Trump said.
I mean, me too. I'm offered loans. I have very few loans now. I've paid off large amounts of debt. But I'll tell you what, I get offered loans from banks at almost nothing. You feel foolish not taking the money.
So, again, he can't help but to, I don't know, second guess himself or correct himself or basically cover his previous statement with, I don't know if I want to call it a lie in this case, but he loves debt. He expresses that interest rates are so low that you should get more debt, which there's some merit to that argument. But at the same time, he's actively paying it off. So do you love debt and you're enjoying the low interest rates? Or are you paying off your debt because you're scared of debt? Which is it, Donald? I mean, this segment is not even fucking 2 minutes long. And he's corrected himself on his prediction of where the market's going to go. It's going to go up. B, it's going to go down. Interest rates and debt, he loves it. And rates are low and he wants to borrow more. B, he's paying it off like a madman because he's terrified of what? Low interest rates?
Okay. Warren, Donald Trump, look, thank you very much indeed for joining us on Varney and Company this morning. Much appreciated.
Thank you.
Sir. Yes, sir.
You're
thanks.
terrific. Thanks a lot, sir.
Yeah, you're terrific. You're terrific. Absolutely terrific. Everybody's terrific. The market's going up, but it's going down. All right. Well, that's enough of that bullshit. We're going to do a little palate cleansing via commercial, and then we're going to come back with the interview with John Flanagan talking about Bosnia and his experience selling annuities. And then after that, we're going to have, I guess, almost like a bonus section where I'm going to give you detailed information on one of my listeners and their experience with an annuity. And I'm going to change the name and the places and try to simplify it a little bit so that you can't possibly know who this person is. And I'm going to say this later in this when I do that segment, but this is not meant as a critique of the person who bought this, because they're a listener and he is going to hear this, or she. They're going to hear this and they're going to know it's their situation, but I've changed some things, and it's not because you aren't smart. It's because the system is designed to take advantage of you, and you got taken advantage of, and now we want to fix it. But I want this to be an example for the listeners what not to do. And so I hope it's taken in that spirit. It's not a personal thing. It's just another example of stuff that I see on an ongoing basis. All the time I see this stuff. But anyway, let's take a break and go into the interview. And when that's done, we'll talk more about annuities. This is Phil Ferguson with Polaris Financial Planning, the home of science-based investing. I see people owning really bad investments all of the time. Many advisors are paid a commission by a big company to sell you something you may not need. It's kind of like church. They create fear, then they tell you what you want to hear, and then they take your money. What you want is an advisor that is paid only by you. That is a fee-only fiduciary advisor. Remember, people work for who they are paid by. You can contact me, Phil, at PolarisFinancialPlanning.com, or listen to the cleverly titled The Phil Ferguson Show. Each show, we have an interesting investing skeptically topic and an interview with someone fighting to end religion. Polaris also gives 10% of gross revenue to support the growing secular movement. You're not just getting better investments, you're helping to change the world. All right, everybody, welcome back. This is Phil Ferguson. And, of course, this is the Phil Ferguson Show. Today I have guest John Flanagan, and he's got an interesting combination of experience that I thought my listeners would like to hear. And we're going to cover two big topics. The second one will be his time as a life insurance agent. But his first topic, we're going to talk about some of his military experience. John, are you there?
Yes, sir.
Now, we were talking in pre-show, which the listeners don't get to have. You signed up for the military. What exactly did you do, and how did you get in? What was your job title and all that, rank and all that stuff?
Well, I was fortunate enough to have two parents that, though I disliked school, kept on me, and I had decent grades. I was a good enough athlete that I was able to get into the military academy at West Point right out of high school. So basically the way that works is you go there for 4 years, and upon graduation, you're immediately commissioned as an officer. I had selected the armor as my branch of service, and you leave there, you go straight to your armor basic course, and then you show up, and they put a second lieutenant bar on your hat and give you a platoon, and at that point, you're supposed to know everything.
So what does that mean, you're in armor?
So you've got everybody's mostly familiar with your major branches of the Army, Navy, Air Force, Marines, and then the Coast Guard.
Right.
Within the Army, there are different branches. So you may be an infantry officer, or an infantryman. You may be a field artillery. Armor is basically comprised of tanks, the M1A2s, and cavalry, which is kind of a lot like what you saw. Cavalry would be the old days from the horses, from lineage back from Custer, where the unit's job is to go out and find the enemy and protect friendly forces, and that's what I did as an armored officer.
All right, and so you finished West Point, you get in the military, and where did you go? Where did they send you?
Unfortunately, as an armor officer, there aren't too many choices, and there's even less now. I went first, duty station was to Fort Hood, Texas, which is just I think most folks might know where Temple is or Waco. It's just about an hour, 15 minutes south and west of Waco. Not a whole lot there. It's basically West Texas. So one of the neat things that I did while I was there is I was detailed, if you would. My unit got asked to go to Cuba when we had what was called Operation Sea Signal. It was when we had the influx of rafters coming from Cuba, and President Bush Sr. had decided, his administration, they decided we were going to police all these guys up and kind of keep them at Guantanamo Bay. So because we had that there, and one of the interesting things is that some of the leftovers or remnants from when we had all the Cuban folks rafters there, what we did is we kept them there in time to get them properly processed to come to the States. And then, of course, we would do background checks and weed out criminals. But basically, the families were able to come to the States. But as I was starting to say, one of the remnants of that was Camp X-Ray, which is where they put a lot of terrorists from the recent war on terrorism.
And so at some point, you got shipped over to, I guess, transferred to, I don't know what the proper lingo is, Bosnia.
Yeah. From there, you flash forward a couple years, and I was with part of the 3rd Armored Cavalry Regiment, and we went over to Bosnia as part of Stabilization Force 7, which was a NATO operation. So, and with our unit, we were actually partnered in our multinational division. We had two squadrons, which is about, I think between all of our support and everything else, we had about 1,500 soldiers. We had a Russian brigade that was there. We worked with the Danes, the Poles, the Turks, Carabinieri. But basically what our job there was, this was the stabilization force, not the implementation force. The implementation force kind of stopped hostilities. What we were there to do was to provide freedom of maneuver to all the non-governmental organizations so that the country could rebuild. And we were there just to make sure that, for lack of a better term, everybody played nicely.
Yeah. Now, for some of the listeners, especially if they're a little younger, because this all happened a few years ago, if I can be so kind, what's a little bit of the background? And we don't want to get too much in detail, but where did Bosnia come from? Has this country always been there?
Yeah, Bosnia is one of the ones that's it's really interesting, and it's certainly worth a read. I'll just hit the highlights. I mean, basically, you can trace back the hostilities that mostly there's 3 groups over there that they've had with each other clear back to Roman times. In fact, one of the first divisions happened back in like 1050, something like that, when the Roman Church and the Byzantine Empire were kind of fighting against each other. And then you had this big split off. You had the Slovaks and the Croats. They all went to become Roman Catholic and used the Roman alphabet, the same alphabet we use. And then you had the Serbs that went Eastern Orthodox and used the Cyrillic alphabet. Then basically over the next few hundred years, you had the Ottomans come in, and basically what would happen is one side would end up pairing up or teaming with the power side, and the other side would be oppressed for a while. For example, when the Ottomans came in, they tolerated religious diversity, but only Muslims could own property, vote, or govern. So the Slovaks thought, Islam looks pretty good. So now they're in power for all this time. So you have most of the Slovaks, which in turn become Bosniaks later. So you've got the Bosniaks, and then you've got the Croats, and the Serbs are still Catholic. Well, flash forward a little bit more, and if we all can remember our world history, World War I started in Austria-Hungary, and that was basically that was along those same lines, those people fighting. It was the assassination happened in Sarajevo. It happens on the day of an anniversary of a Serbian king that was killed by the Ottomans. And you end up having World War I, where at the end of the war they divide some lines and they say, okay, you people go live and be happy with each other. Well, as we know, that